Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Pierre Poilievre is the Member of Parliament for Carleton in Ontario, and he's running to be leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and, eventually, Prime Minister. He joins us to discuss his ideas and plans for Canada's economic growth and prosperity for Canadians. Welcome back to Boom and Bust.
Thanks very much for having me, Tony.
Now, Pierre, your campaign has really been based about making Canada the freest country in the world. What does that mean in terms of economic issues?
It means a smaller government with bigger citizens. It means removing the regulatory gatekeepers that stand in the way of immigrants who want to work in their trained professions. Removing the gatekeepers that block First Nations from developing their natural resources. Removing the gatekeepers that have prevented Canada from self-sufficiency in energy by blocking natural resource projects. We need to remove all of those gatekeepers. And we also need to give people back control of their money. People have lost control of their money because inflationary deficits financed by central bank money printing have caused the cost of everything to rise at its highest level in 3 decades, with 6.8% officially reported consumer price inflation, plus housing prices up 50% in just 2 years. We're experiencing the worst inflation in my lifetime, if you combine both asset price and consumer price inflation. And that is all the result of government policies that send too many dollars chasing too few goods. I'm going to reinstate central bank independence so that we get inflation back down. People's purchasing power remains and they have control of their own money.
You've also mentioned frequently about how Canada needs more affordable housing and more housing generally. Would you care to expand on that as well?
Yeah, and that's another example of the gatekeepers. Right now, we have more dollars chasing fewer houses, which leads to higher prices. So federal government printed $400 billion. Of course, they dumped that into the financial system. It got lent out in mortgages. That inflated home prices. But that's the short-term cause of the 50% hike in home prices over the last 2 years. However, the longer-term problem is that we just don't have enough houses in Canada. We have the fewest homes per capita of any G7 country, even though we have the most land to build on. We got more land, but we have fewer houses. Why? Well, the answer is that you can't get building permits fast enough in Canada. The cost of building permits, fees, charges, taxes, delays adds about $250,000 to the cost of the average home in Toronto and $655,000 to the cost of a home in Vancouver. So what's the solution? Well, the federal government gives a lot of infrastructure money to these big cities, and I'm going to link those dollars to the number of houses that actually get built. So big cities want more money for roads, bridges, transit. They're going to have to get their gatekeepers out of the way and allow builders to build faster. I'm also going to sell off 15% of Canada's 37,000 federal buildings, which were underutilized before COVID. And I'm going to sell off 15% so they can actually be used to become housing, sell it to the market, but attach a covenant that they have to be converted into affordable housing. We'll use the proceeds of sale to reduce the deficit, and we'll have more housing for our young people.
What's been the reaction? I know we've had a lot of shows on this program talking about how this impacts on millennials and zillennials, but have they taken to your ideas?
Yes, my campaign is driven by younger audience. If you go to my rallies, it's often, well, you remember, Tony, the old story of the 14-year-old that was dragged kicking and screaming by their parents to go and sit in a sleepy conservative meeting. Well, now when I hold a rally, it's the opposite. I have people come up and they say, my 14-year-old told me I had to come to this, and they forced me to drive them here. And so our campaign is very young. It's younger than I think our Conservative Party has seen since it established itself with the merger in 2003-4. So we have a youth-driven campaign. I attribute that to the housing issue.
Right.
It's the first time in Canadian history when working class youth as a group have concluded that they cannot own a home.
And welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Pierre Poilievre. He is, of course, a candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada leadership and eventually Prime Minister. Pierre, you were mentioning in the first segment about inflation, which, of course, has been a scourge throughout the G20 nations. But what makes it so bad in Canada? Why are we suffering as much as we are here?
Well, first of all, we should never give ourselves the excuse that this is a problem everywhere and therefore we have no control over it. Switzerland has very low inflation, under 3% right now. Why? Because they protected the purchasing power of the Swiss franc. They haven't been printing cash to fund deficits. Instead, their monetary policy does what it's supposed to, which is to retain the value of the currency, and that's why the Swiss can buy more with their money than we can. It is true that Canada is not the only country that has caused inflation for its population. There's no question the Federal Reserve in the US, the European Central Bank, they've all printed cash to fund uncontrollable spending, and that has caused inflation for their people. But as our mothers taught us, Tony, just because your friends are jumping off a bridge doesn't mean you have to. So it's not good enough to say, well, everybody's got inflation, so why don't we just go along for the ride? Everyone's got lung cancer because they're all smoking cigarettes. That's not a good reason to smoke cigarettes.
Right.
To the contrary, it's a good reason to say, let's learn from their mistakes and do exactly the opposite. And let's retain the purchasing power of our cash. And that's what I want to get back to, an independent central bank with low inflation. And I would just want to catch at one point on housing. Young people feel like they've lost control of their lives because they can't afford a home. A home is not like a normal consumer good. If bread prices go up, well, young people can eat more oatmeal. If the cost of an iPhone goes up, they might go and buy another smartphone. There's ways to shop around for an alternative. If you can't afford a home, you can't plan your life. You cannot get home equity for your eventual retirement, build collateral or credit history for an eventual small business loan, or get married and have kids. So the most basic human decisions and actions are robbed when you can't afford a home. And this is why it is not your normal political irritant. This is a massive psychological crisis for our young people. You want to know, I think one of the reasons we have so much trouble with mental health among youth is because they can't figure out what's going to happen to their lives when they can't leave their parents' basements. Right. You're not the master of your own destiny if you can't get into your own home. And it's not good enough to live in a 400 square foot rented apartment paying someone else's mortgage. You need to own a home. So the solution is get the gatekeepers out of the way, sell off unused federal buildings, stop printing money, start building houses.
I'm glad you added that. I was struck by the way you characterized the Bank of Canada. You said give it more independence because, of course, your opponents are attacking you saying you want to remove independence of the Bank of Canada. But what you're saying is they've been beholden to the Trudeau government. Maybe expand on that a little bit.
Well, they've both been beholden to one another. Look, if you listen to Tiff Macklem, the current governor, he's made numerous inappropriate comments about government finance policy. He has endorsed liberal deficits in his public pronouncements. He's endorsed liberal public policy decisions. That is not his job. It shows political bias on his part. Furthermore, if you look at the schedule for money printing that he published last year, it was funny. On a Monday, Chrystia Freeland came out and said she wanted to borrow $150 billion. And on the Wednesday of the same week, the governor of the Bank of Canada announced he was going to print $150 billion. So that's not independence, that's dependence, right? The federal government was dependent on the central bank to print the money to fund its deficits. That is not the role of the central bank. It's not anywhere in the mandate of the bank to fund government deficits. The bank's job is to keep inflation low, and they weren't doing it. In fact, their entire policy suite was designed to please the prime minister's decisions, and that is not the job of an independent central bank. The bank should have been exclusively focused on low inflation. They were not. They clearly were not. They were printing money and expanding easy cash even after inflation was well above the 2% target. So they're the ones that made that decision. I'm going to give back real independence with a new governor who will get inflation down.
We're having our conversation with Pierre Poilievre. He is a candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada leadership and eventually Prime Minister. We're going to continue that discussion right after these messages. Please stay with us. Pierre, it seems that some of our basic institutions are failing. And, we pride ourselves on being an advanced economic, nation. But I'm just thinking about the latest mess at Pearson Airport as an example. I know you've commented on this. Can you talk about the state of Canada right now and what has to be improved?
Well, let's start with the airport. It is a catastrophe. I show up there to do flights out of Toronto, Pearson, which is the principal flight hub for a lot of Canadian destinations. So I'm there all the time, and it's been a zoo. The lineups are appalling, way worse than they were, 2019 and earlier on. It's hard to understand exactly what could justify this. I understand that the COVID vaccine mandates have complicated the process of approving passengers. This is obviously an unnecessary, unjustified attack on people's personal medical decisions and their freedom, but it's also causing mayhem in the processing of passengers to get on planes. And by the way, it's hurting our tourism sector because it's preventing foreign conference goers from having their meetings here in our major destinations. But, the fact that we cannot process passengers as well or better than we used to proves that we're moving backwards. Look at the overall economy. You think about it, back in 1974, my buddy moved here from Italy with his parents. His dad swept roads and worked in construction, and his mom made sandwiches at a senior's home. They were able to buy a nice bungalow in downtown Ottawa and paid off in 7 years. Now their granddaughter would not be able to buy the same home, even though she has a university degree. Right. So explain to me how it is that over the course of the last 5 decades, we've actually gotten worse off. Clearly, the system is broken. It is designed to privilege the elite few and protect them behind the gatekeepers while leaving the working class out in the cold. And that's exactly what I'm trying to change. I want to make this the freest country on earth and put people back in charge of their lives. And that's why I think you're seeing so many elites attacking me. They see this as a threat to the privileged status they've enjoyed at public expense for a very long time.
Canada is also being left out of some of the new economic architecture. I'm thinking of the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum as an example of that. Are you concerned about this as well?
Well, we are a trading nation. We need genuine free trade with our allies around the world that generally favors consumers and workers. And we need those agreements to actually reduce trade barriers rather than just favor multinationals by extending their power. So I think that in all these negotiations, the core interest of expanding the economic freedom of Canadian consumers and workers should be forefront.
And you've also talked. Let's get to our workers. There's a lot of talk about Conservatives now starting to be heard by our blue-collar workers across Ontario in the last provincial election, now across the nation. Is this something that you want to see more of?
Yes. I think if you look at the inflationary economy that Trudeau has created, it is hurting workers, not capitalists. If you are a billionaire with lots of stocks and real estate, your assets have gone up to protect you against inflation. You probably even got richer. The wealthiest 50 billionaires in Canada I think they saw their net worth rise by a third in the early days of COVID, as all that easy money inflated their net worth. Meanwhile, the same phenomenon reduces the purchasing power of workers' paychecks as they buy less. So it's a real transfer from the have-nots to the have-yachts that has happened. And there's a very small, well-connected group who are protected, who have the government backing them up against competition and inflating their asset values, gating in their communities with restrictions on building. And they're getting richer and richer every single year. And the working class, the people who actually do the nation's work, the guys and gals in steel-toed boots and reflective jackets, they're just seeing their wages evaporate. I'm meeting people, like I was in St. John. I met a guy, as a welder. He said he's got to tape up his work boots because he can't afford new ones. He's got holes in them. This guy is a licensed welder, Tony. Since when can a licensed welder afford a new pair of boots? That's the economy that we've created, and those are the people that we need to champion as conservatives.
And welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, here with Pierre Poilievre. He is running for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada and eventually Prime Minister. Pierre, Canada is an energy-rich country, and obviously this could be of assistance to Canadian consumers as well as other nations that have been relying on Russian energy, as an example. What's your vision for Canada's energy markets?
Self-sufficiency. Government gatekeepers have killed two major pipelines, the Energy East pipeline, which would have carried 1 million barrels of Western oil to Eastern refineries and then on to Europe. Ironically, that would have been helpful right now had it been built, because we could have used it to wean Europe off Russia. Second, they killed the Northern Gateway pipeline, which would have allowed Western Canadian energy to reach the energy-hungry Asian markets. And third, they killed the major projects like the Tech Frontier Mine, $20 billion project that was supported by all the First Nations communities around it. We have, back in 2015, there were something like 12.5 natural gas liquefaction proposals. Not a single one of them has been built. That is because Trudeau has put in place a regime of gatekeepers who prevent anything from getting approved. And as a result, we're now importing 130,000 barrels of overseas oil every single day. These environmentalists don't show up at the port in New Brunswick to protest these Middle Eastern tankers. They just shut down opportunities for First Nations in the West instead. So my approach will be to repeal the anti-energy law C-69, repeal the ban on offshore shipping in the West Coast, C-48, approve Newfoundland's proposal to increase its production by 400,000 barrels a day. That will allow us to replace all the overseas oil we're bringing in. Within 5 years, a Poilievre government will ban dictator oil from Canada altogether. I'm also going to unleash the production of Canada's 1,300 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. We have the greatest ability to liquefy it in Quebec, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, British Columbia, because we have cold weather, which helps with liquefying. That's why you turn a gas into a liquid as you cool it down. And we have pollution-free hydro. So the hydroelectricity can be used to liquefy the natural gas and to ship it overseas, to shut down coal-fired plants, a major opportunity to reduce global emissions by shutting down foreign coal-fired plants and replacing them with Canadian natural gas produced in the most environmentally responsible way in the world. So this is the difference. Trudeau supports oil, foreign oil. I support Canadian energy, and that's what we will make happen when I'm Prime Minister.
We've got a couple of minutes left. More general question. Do you see your economic policies and your vision for the country as fundamentally an optimistic vision, that you think Canada can be a world beater again, can be a country that works for its citizens? Is that one of the things that drives you, this sense of optimism?
Yes, look, we have the second biggest landmass with about a cornucopia of natural resources. We're located next to the most powerful democracy that has ever existed and the most lucrative export market in the history of the world, which, by the way, happens to pay for part of our defense costs. We have an undefended border to the south. We have ports in all directions. We have brilliant immigrants and an incredible ability to convert our population into economic output because of the brilliance of our people. So we have bright opportunities ahead. So remove the gatekeepers, bring back and unleash free enterprise in this country. We can be the greatest place on earth in which to earn a paycheck, raise a family, and live a free life.
Pierre Poilievre, it's been great to have you on the program. I know you've been very busy with your campaigning, and I know it's taken you away a little bit from your family. I know Anna's been doing double shifts at home, but hope all is well, and I hope the campaign is going well for you.
Thank you very much, Tony. I really appreciate it, and all the best to you and your family.
Thank you. Thanks to Pierre Poilievre for being here today. Our first interview with among the 6 leadership candidates for the Conservative Party of Canada. Hopefully we'll get some other guests on in the future as well, but very interesting to talk about economic issues with Pierre. Obviously very passionate about those issues. We'll have more to say about this in the future, I'm sure. Thanks for watching.